and actually after only 4 minutes. So let me go back to where I started. This is about the habits of top producers and what I've learned by coaching and training people and managing salespeople for over 35 years. And then I've been on the road myself, helping people sell, consulting about sales, managing salespeople, and for my own sales since 1975. And I was in a business to business sales role. And so the people that I called on, because we had supplies for businesses, they already had what I was buying, what I was selling. They were buying it from other people. So the first thing I said was, and this is not how I was trained. In fact, I was trained to give a spiel, tell them about the company, and then discover maybe that I wasted their time. So I learned it on my own by saying to people, hey, you're already buying what I'm selling, right? Become a master of the obvious. So should we have a conversation at all? Do you need another salesman? Maybe you don't. I'd understand. Fascinating how a lot of people would say, well, I am buying everything. You're right. The masters of the obvious, right? And that's what I want you all to become as part of what you do. Be aware and authentic and be there to help people and also be a master of the obvious. So had I continued with what I was trained in those days, right, it was like features, advantages, benefits. Those are important at some point, but first, if they're interested and if they have questions about certain features of your product or service, but you discover that from asking them questions. So then I would ask people questions if they said, sure, we can always have another option to buy products from. So then I'd say, well, then what is it about your existing relationship that you're unhappy with? And some would say, well, not really unhappy. Like to check their pricing. And I said, well, I'll probably be the same pricing. We're not the lowest. So if that's what you want is a price list, that's not something I do. I said, can I ask you another question? Sure. Well, let's suppose I gave you pricing. What would you do with that? Well, I'd probably share it with the existing supplier and see if there were places that he would come down. I said, okay, well, thank you. That's not for me. But if you don't mind, if I stop by every once in a while with an idea or a new product, sure. Some would say, you know what, I do need a new supplier. And I'd say, well, let me see what you're buying first. Take me through your inventory. And that way I would discover things about the product, the condition of the boxes, how they were delivered. If they were using an outdated product and there were new ideas and new products on the market, it was fascinating what I learned from that. But it didn't come from having a spiel. It came from starting with, why did they need another salesperson anyway? You probably don't need another salesperson is a negative reverse. And some would say, yeah, no, it would really be good. All right, tell me about one of the reasons why you think that'd be good. And I discovered that either they were shopping just for price or I discovered they were unhappy. And if they were unhappy, and especially as we were going through what they were currently buying, they would tell me the story gradually. And I could gauge their emotion. People need to be emotionally involved to make a change. The thing most people fear, whether it's software or business-to-business supplies or insurance or financial advice, most people already have a relationship somewhere. So they're most concerned about breaking that relationship. And if they're not emotional about it, they won't break the relationship. So through your curiosity, because you're authentic because you're not worried about your commission. You're concerned about the customer. You ask questions to determine whether or not it's a fit for both of you, for them and for you. And when people are emotional about it, you'll know. Well, for the last 6 months, there's been errors in the delivery, and I'm really angry about it. Why? Tell me about that. What about those deliveries? They were late, crushed boxes, lots of back orders, whatever. I wanted to hear their pain, their headache, because maybe the company I worked for, and at that time it was my brother's company, maybe we had some of the same problems. And I wanted to be upfront with them if they shared with me some of the problems. I said, we all have back orders sometimes. I don't know what percentage of back orders they have. And we sold hospitals and convalescent homes, schools, private schools, factories. I mean, there was not a business that we didn't have supplies for, which was another thing to focus on. Behavior. So my thinking, I thought big. I called on places the company had never called on before. And we won some of those. So it was like I was a AAA ball team every once in a while playing in a major league park. And sometimes we won. And we learned in detail about those customers because we were flexible enough to do things for them. Stock inventory for them, reduce their own inventory. But I discovered things I could do for them that helped. And so thinking big is a trait that top producers have. And they call high enough. That's the other thing they do. They call high enough. CFO, COO, CEO, because they get referred down if those people are too busy to be the decision maker. What CFO wouldn't be interested in hearing about something that would improve the company's productivity or profitability or reduce cost, operating cost? COO. And again, they might send you to a person, hey, that sounds interesting to me. Imagine the COO saying that to you. That sounds interesting to me. I'm going to have Marie handle that. She's the director of all this part of the company. Would you transfer me? Or can I email you and then you refer me by email? But you get the point. You're going to get referred down. But a lot of people don't think big enough. And they don't manage their minds. So the people that I've worked with for over 20 years, by the way, if you want to ask yourself why, I've seen, number one, I've been with them long enough so they know what I'm talking about works. But it's not new. It's managing their mind. The first and foremost place. What I call the small-minded thinker, the acorn brain. That's my logo. I teach them not to listen to the brain. I give them tips and tools how, and I tell them don't take my word for it when I first meet people. Prove it to yourself. Prove it to yourself. That as you manage your mind, that you're part of the reason if things aren't working. Or maybe you were very successful and all of a sudden you hit a flat spot. You're the reason. Here's the thought process that you can use right away. That life is happening for you, not to you. Life is happening for you, not to you. Top producers are always looking for the gift in what's occurring in their life. Whether it's difficult people or difficult situations, they know that life is a friend. Now, are they 100% in that mindset? No. It's okay to be human once in a while and wonder why this is happening to me. And tell 9 friends or tell strangers at a local watering hole on a Friday night. We're human, but it's okay to be human. The thing to do is work to increase the amount of time you manage your mind. Raina Maria Rilke called that mind the little hooligan. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff called that mind the machine. Will you let the machine run you? Gurdjieff used to ask. Or will you run it? Raina Maria Rilke in the 1800s said, will you let that little hooligan run you? Or will you run it? Top producers learn to manage their mind, and they get to a place where 60 to 70% of the time, They either find the gift or they accept that they created the mess. And if you realize and take accountability for a mess you've created, the same power creates positive events and occurrences. And if you don't look at anything as a mess, which is a good idea, you look at it as a teacher. Then you can change, that life is a friend, urging you. Now, are there events that happen and things that really can derail us in life? Of course. We've all had either tragedies or occurrences that are out of our control. Then our response to it is important. If you think life is happening to you, you might spend a year licking your wounds. Now, I'm not saying don't spend any time getting over some occurrence, but get over it as soon as you can by thinking, hey, wait, I can't control what happened. What I can control is my response to it. So let me get back to focusing on what I want more of. Energy flows where intention goes. What you focus on expands. What you feed, this is how life works. What gets fed grows. You're not exempt from that. And so where you begin to discipline the mind is one, I hope you're visualizing a big future. And then you're making a plan starting with the end in mind, your big future. What does that person look like in the world that's already achieved that big future you're picturing? And what do they do? How do they act? You begin acting and doing the things that people who are already at the place you want to go, they're here or they're way up here. You start acting, starting with the end in mind, like they do. And you picture big things in your mind. Imagination is everything. It's the preview of life's coming attractions. Albert Einstein said that. Physicists have said that particles are arranged in super collider experiments to behave differently depending on the observer. And they of course, track the people that participate in the experiments. And at first, they didn't understand why certain particles were behaving differently until they realized there were different people at the experiments. The observer has an impact. That's you. And you can develop the observer level of thinking above your own thinking. You expand beyond small-minded thinking. You become the master of your mind. Okay, so that's important, right? Believe you deserve it and the universe will serve it. I don't know who said that, but I've read it many times in different places. I cannot take credit for it. And if I knew who said it, I would give credit. So you're always creating something, and the people that aren't disciplined in a behavior, they're not willing to be coachable, for example. Many top producers have a coach. I mean, my clients have been with me in some cases for over 20 years. And I have multiple clients in that category. And what I've seen them achieve by working on themselves, because I tell them it's not listening to me. It's being willing and open-minded, right? If you have an open mind, don't worry, your brain won't fall out. And then to remember that we live in a miracle. We live in something called a universe. No one knows for sure what that is exactly. And new things are being discovered all the time. So operating in a miracle, living in a universe requires that you begin to expand your small-minded thinker. You begin to model this limitless thing, infinite thing. We call it infinite to give it a boundary because our minds cannot grasp that. So top producers understand that they set high targets, they think big, they picture it, knowing the power of the imagination is a preview of life's coming attractions. And what they feed grows, so they focus on what they want more of. And they manage their mind, because your mind will suggest that you're not worthy. Who you? Why are you thinking that big? You could never close that kind of an account. You could never write a book. You could never give a big talk. None of that is true. You may need some training. You may need someone to help you along the way. I've had coaches for over 20 years, just as I have clients for over 20 years that are willing and open-minded and committed to continuing to learn and grow. And the biggest thing they've changed is their own self-awareness, and they've developed a level of thinking above their thinking. Now, is it 100% of the time? No, we're human. Now, for leaders have to model this same kind of openness and expansive thinking and help your sales team by identifying who are the most profitable and productive customers you have, the people that love your company. Every customer book tells a story. I'm amazed at the companies that don't say, hey, these are the people that are amazing for us, very profitable, very productive, they love us. This is the next level of customers that are profitable. They're not as productive sometimes, or maybe they're not as profitable, and we like these kind of customers. Then every customer book has people that are in the C or even D level that they should have pre-qualified beforehand, because either you have to fire them, which I don't agree with that idea. That caught on about 10 or 15 years ago. Fire the customer that doesn't fit. No, do the work up front. Qualify people. Find out if it's a fit. But look at your customer book and help your sales team by identifying targets that fit the profile of our top customers, our A or A plus customers, and our B plus customers. And then how you discover those, how you qualify those is with questioning. You develop questions that help your salespeople determine if they're a fit or not. And if they're not a fit, leaders give them permission. Good leaders, great leaders, give the sales team permission, say, I'm not sure you're a fit for us by what you're describing, how you go to market or how you do business or what you're looking for software or what you're looking for as a solution. And then you pause. Because a lot of customers will say, well, what is it that you need for us to be a fit? Now you can tell them, well, my concerns were this. And I'm just wondering if that it has to be that way or the highway. Because it's not something we can do very well. Here's what we do well. They'll tell you. If it's not a fit, fine. Anybody here have 100% of their market share? That's the other things that leaders remind people of and remind salespeople of when they start saying, well, I just can't find anything new lately. Seems like we got a lot of the market. Where do I go? If you don't have 100% of the market, there's always an opportunity. And let me just suggest this. I've got clients that start to think about the economy slowing down when they've got less than 10% of market share. Why would it ever slow down? That means their behavior has to ramp up. They have to do some brainstorming. Maybe they're not calling on the right end of the market, or they're not calling high enough. It's their behavior. And that's what good leaders do. They check in on their behaviors. Hey, I've noticed your sales have been flattened out for the last 6 months, 8 months, or a year. Let's go back to when things were working. Because you really had great years. Last year, the year before that. So what's the difference between what you were doing then and what you're doing now? But you want to help them. And then maybe you make some calls. Or you discover what's going on in their life. Well, things have changed. Personally, I'm going through this, this, and this. Then you can understand why they're at a flat spot. So there's leaders in sales that model behaviors, right? They're students of the game as well. So that means they're reading, they're listening to books, they're attending seminars, maybe they're online, so that they get ideas about how to grow and challenge their own thinking. how to grow their mind. Because the mind is fascinating, right? If it's amazing what it can hold. I won't even tell you the number of books I read and listen to a year because it's my job to do that, right? And I'm not bragging. I also write books. Here's another thing that gets in the way of people. This is my latest book, No BS Coaching. Wake up to the BS that you tell yourself. To the BS you tell yourself. Because here's how the mind works. Dr. James Doty in the book Mind Magic said this. Think of your mind, 10% of it conscious, what you need to operate daily, right? Making sure you brush your teeth and take a shower and dress properly and appropriately, make your meetings on time, do your scheduling. But he said 10% of the mind is all that's needed for that. He said the 90% of it is divided into two. The subconscious and the unconscious. The unconscious, let's talk about that for a second, is all the things we don't worry about. We don't need to worry about. It would, for some of us, automatically grow our hair. Doesn't always happen 100% for everybody. But our nails, our blinking our eyes, watering our eyes, our circulation, the replacement of our cells. 100% of our cells in a year, every year. We don't think about it. The beating of our heart, none of that. We don't think about it. The remaining half is the subconscious. And Dr. James Doty says, think of it this way. A file system and a bloodhound. Whatever you put in the file system, he says, which is, if it's a BS story, now I want to caution you because it might be true, but if you put in that something that's not true, this person bothers me because they're a whatever, they're obnoxious, they're an obnoxious AH or idiot, whatever you want to call them, that might not be true. But when you put that in your mind, your bloodhound goes looking for evidence only that it's true. It does not, despite any evidence to the contrary. It only goes looking for evidence that what you put in there is true. And we've seen evidence of that over the last 4 or 5 years, right? When people had different ideas about COVID, it was, I think, of the Great Barrington Experiment. 50 scientists came out with ideas about doing things differently. They were shut down by Google and YouTube and the internet and the news media, most of the news media, not all, but most. They were shut down. Scientists work to guard against confirmation bias. And that's what that was. They were upset that the Great Barrington Declaration was providing evidence that what their own evidence was untrue. And usually what scientists did was this. Wow, that's interesting data. Let's share data because our evidence shows this. Let's share data because maybe together we can come up with a new conclusion. That's a dialogue. And what both sides were having back then was one group of scientists was saying they were right, the other group of scientists saying they were right, and pointing the fingers mostly from this side that wanted that Great Barrington Declaration shut down. They were saying, we're right, they're wrong, shut them down. That's not how science works. So I was surprised that scientists even did that. They weren't interested in how did you people come up with that conclusion, because there were more than 50 scientists, a lot of great scientists from different universities and different research around the world signed on to that Great Barrington Declaration. And so I was shocked when it was shut down because that's not what scientists do. But what they were doing was they were stuck in their small-minded thinking. They had put in the file system, the people on this side said, we're right. And in their file system, their bloodhound was only looking for evidence to prove they were right, despite evidence to the contrary. So that's a great example of what Dr. James Doty talks about. So be careful as a salesperson and as a leader what you put into the file system. And that may be a BS story that you're telling yourself. And in most cases, it holds people back. Now, it doesn't mean that what you've put in there isn't true. But you have to be open-minded to gather some facts. and be willing to hear, maybe have a dialogue with someone you disagree with, or maybe come to some determination that it might upset you a little bit, right? It might stretch that little acorn brain, the machine, or the little hooligan. These are the habits of top producers. They have a dialogue, not a monologue. A monologue is the story one tells oneself. A dialogue is defined as a jointly created reality. And my work is about stretching people's capacity to focus on things that are big, much bigger than themselves. My clients continue to achieve things that astonish them and amaze them. I'm glad I'm along for the ride. I've done very little along the way except convince them. When I hear limited thinking, when I hear a BS story, I tell them, what's another way to look at that? I ask them to consider, does that sound like small-minded thinking? Again, we can see a lot of examples of it, especially in the last 8 years. A lot of small-minded thinking. Anytime that one group of people is pointing the finger at another saying they're wrong, then the other side does the same thing, no, you're wrong, there's a big gap right here. And that's where the magic is, by having a dialogue, by coming together. Hey, how'd you come to that conclusion? Let me tell you. Here's how we came to that conclusion. How'd you come to your conclusion? Let me tell you. For us to be so threatened about different ideas is really going backwards. The universe is expanding, and all these new telescopes are discovering many new things about the universe. Are we not supposed to model that, or are we supposed to be small-minded thinkers? There's a lot that goes on here on this little planet that is very small-minded. And the only way we'll overcome it is as we begin to challenge ourselves. And top producers do that. Not 100% of the time. We all come to some conclusions and make judgments sometimes that are wrong, or they're off the mark, let's say, not necessarily wrong, because we're not willing to have a dialogue. And we're not modeling the behavior we want to see in others. So top producers are always looking at that. And they're not afraid of anyone that challenges them. If you have any questions, you can email me, steve@stevelentini.com. I always give a free coaching session. It can be an hour, it can be 2 hours. By the way, if you know somebody that needs a free coaching session, you can tell them that I gave it to you as a gift, and you can gift it to someone else. You could always say, hey, why don't you talk to Steve Lentini? He might be able to help you. And I'm looking for certain people that are a fit. I'm going to help them one way or the other. They're going to leave with something that will help them. They may not be my client after our 2 hour or 1 hour discussion. That's okay. They're going to leave with something that can help them. One thing I look for is people that are willing. I'm not pulling people up the hill. I'm not dragging people up the hill. I'm going to push them, right? Leaders have to do that too. Do you whip the ox or push the cart? A lot of leaders, even today, still whip the ox. Fascinating. That's how they think that's the way to develop a healthy culture, a positive culture, and top producing people. Get in the trenches with them. Help people win. Help them figure out their challenges are your challenges, by the way. Help them win. And when you do, the whole company wins. Steve@stevelentini.com. You want me to spell it? Steve? Here, I'll make it easy. On the book cover. Steve@stevelentini.com. Steve@stevelentini.com. I'm glad to help. Have a great day. This is a fantastic day.